Hello everybody and welcome to conference. And it is so good to see lots of familiar faces, but a lot of newer ones too. And I'm not just talking about my new MP colleagues. For those of you present at my keynote speech last year, you may have remembered a certain bar chart because, oh, do we love a bar chart. But that was the one with only 2 votes in it, because that was the result in my constituency of North East Fife in 2017. A disappointing night for Liberal Democrats across the country and a particularly painful one for us in Fife. But then, after 2019, it wasn't 2 votes in it, but 1,300. And that's when I became the newly elected Liberal Democrat Member of Parliament for North East Fife. We got it over the line thanks to a huge amount of hard work. But even for us celebrating our result, we were commiserating another difficult night for Liberal Democrats across the whole of the UK. But in 2024, it was a different story. That bar chart that just a few years ago had 2 votes in it, that just a couple of months ago had the SNP holding North East Fife on the basis of constituency boundaries, now has 13,500 votes in it. Which is maybe not so helpful for that future squeeze vote leaflet. So Willie Rennie and Ming Campbell, you can eat your hearts out. You may both be able to run further and faster than me, but when it comes to running in North East Fife, we know who is the best performing Liberal Democrat. And conference, I am so humbled to have been given the opportunity to serve the communities of North East Fife in Parliament for a second term. Because being the MP for North East Fife is such a privilege. It is home to so much. World-renowned artists, whisky and gin distilleries, and historic communities such as those in the fishing communities of the East Neuk, the post-industrial area of Leavenmouth, and the breadbasket of Fife, the How. But during the summer, I finally got to visit my constituents, the Puffins, on the Isle of May, because we are campaigning on sand eels fishing, don't you know? I got to experience the Grass to Grill tour at Balcaskey Estate, seeing cows graze freely in woodland, followed by a visit to the Pittenweem Arts Festival, which is becoming increasingly renowned. And it is the honour of my life to be their local champion in Westminster. And I'm not the only one. It wasn't so much a case of Liberal Democrats winning here, it was Liberal Democrats winning everywhere. We won in Wales. We won back the West Country. We broke new ground in the home counties. 72 Liberal Democrat local champions elected by their constituents and who are already working day in, day out, fighting for their communities. But it would be remiss of me not to mention part of the result that was particularly dear to my heart, and that was our success in Scotland. Returning 3 Scottish colleagues with increased majorities, Susan Murray winning back Mid-Dumbartonshire. Hooray! And we have even managed to sneak in a couple of extra Scots in English constituencies, like Callum Miller in Bicester and Woodstock, and in Surrey Heath, formerly represented by Michael Gove. We swapped a Scottish Conservative for a Scottish Liberal Democrat. And Al, if the similarities to your predecessor don't end there, I thoroughly expect you to be strutting your stuff at Lib Dem Disco later tonight. And conference, what a special moment it was when the last result to be declared across the whole of the UK was the Liberal Democrats winning back Charles Kennedy's old seat. Well done, Angus. And I'm sure Charles would have been proud of us all for what we achieved on that historic night in July. And just as we did our bit across the UK to deliver a decisive blow to an out-of-touch and out-of-time Conservative government, so too did we play our part in beating the SNP. Now, I'm not going to stand here and gloat about the demise of the SNP. I value my marriage. But I do think there is a lesson for everyone in politics about what happens when you take voters for granted. I'm not sure the SNP had that sense of entitlement a decade ago. But over recent years, they have used their position on the green benches in Westminster not to work to improve things, but simply to grandstand. And they use their positions of power in the Scottish Government not to deliver, but to over-promise. So no wonder so many former SNP voters that I spoke to during the campaign were utterly disillusioned with that party. But meanwhile, Liberal Democrats were out there offering positive solutions. And of course, on solutions to the constitutional question, I've said it before, it's not that I disagree with the SNP on the diagnosis, it's that I disagree with them on the cure. And our Liberal Democrat vision of political reform, of fair votes, of making things work, not tearing things down within a fair federal union is what we want to see. And as we approach 10 years since the independence referendum in Scotland, it's clear, both from the recent Sturgeon Salmons documentary and from the recent SNP manifesto, just look at page 1, line 1 of that they have simply failed to take on board the message that the people of Scotland have clearly delivered to them. The SNP have pursued a decade of division, a decade which has failed, and the cost of that has been borne by the people of Scotland. And meanwhile, we, the Liberal Democrats, have listened. We have earned back that trust, and we have made the priorities of ordinary people our priorities. The state of the NHS in Scotland, the sewage that the SNP has allowed to be dumped into our rivers and coastal areas, the education of our children, which the SNP government has neglected and allowed to decline. And we have made clear that if you put your trust in the Scottish Liberal Democrats, then we will repay it. We will stand up for your communities. Just as Willie Rennie has been standing up for our schools, he has been absolutely assiduous in his role in the Education Committee in holding the Scottish Government to account. Or Alex Cole-Hamilton calling out the disgrace that is NHS dentistry in Scotland, where whole swathes of the country, including Fife, have become dental deserts. And looking at my colleagues in the Highlands and Islands, Jamie, for instance, has been standing up for his constituents who have to drive hundreds of miles in order to access maternity services. As the new chair of the DEFRA Select Committee, congratulations, Alistair, by the way, he said this week, the SNP and Labour don't know how to stand up for our rural communities, but the Liberal Democrats do. Our message of listening to communities resonated deeply at this election. Scottish Liberal Democrats had our best results since 2010 under Alex Cole-Hamilton's leadership, and I've been proud to serve in the Scottish Party as his deputy. And Conference, we have the chance to repeat that success coming very soon. 2026 is less than 2 years away. We have the chance to kick the SNP out of power for the first time in nearly 20 years. It's time for a change in Scotland. And be in no doubt, Scottish Liberal Democrats are part of that change. Now, when it came to our campaign in North East Fife, it became clear that we were the only ones working. My existing parts of North East Fife were used to hearing from the local Lib Dem team. But the communities of places such as Kennoway, Windigates and the rest of Leven, hearing regularly from a political party outside of election time was a bit of an experience for them. And I can promise we've created an expectation which we will continue to deliver on. Of course, one of the benefits of our historic general election result is that we have returned to our former position as a third party in the House of Commons. And Conference, we aim to take a very different approach to the SNP. I think what people want to see is members of Parliament working together to try and secure a fair deal for the whole of the UK, not simply trying to divide us. Being the third party is a big responsibility. We have a far greater ability to effect change now than we did in previous recent parliaments. We want to be a constructive opposition. We want to be local champions, and we want to do things differently. It's great to have the opportunity to vote on a regular basis for Liberal Democrat amendments to legislation. And we're also looking forward to our first Opposition Day debate, where we control the parliamentary timetable in just a few weeks' time. Part of what we'll also be doing is looking at how Parliament itself works. Our Parliament gives a special platform for the largest opposition party over and above the third party. But the election result we have just seen raises questions about whether that is the fairest way forward. After all, in the past 100 years, the gap between the second and the third parties has never been smaller. For every 3 Conservative MPs, there are now 2 Liberal Democrats. And if you'll indulge my inner politics geek, I mean, we are at conference, we are in what the Hansard Society has described as a multipolar parliament. And that respected organisation has floated changes that could be introduced in Parliament to reflect that new electoral reality. For a start, opposition days and questions to the Prime Minister being distributed more equally. We have an opportunity to make Parliament work for the better. That's a good thing in and of itself, but if we get it right and Parliament makes better decisions, then that has a positive impact on people's lives too. As Chief Whip, I'll be committed to making sure that we secure those changes. And I, along with Marie Goldman, will be members of the new Modernisation Committee. And one of the first proposals that committee is considering is looking at reviewing second job rules. And it's been suggested that this might include examining whether MPs should moonlight as television presenters. Watch out, Nigel. And when it comes to my flock of 71 MPs, I am fortunate enough to come from a family of keen shinty players. And I have my dad's silver-topped cannon on the wall in my new office. I think it comes off. And I'll be using it metaphorically, not literally, of course, to ensure that it is Liberal Democrat MPs who are getting things done, who are delivering for their communities. Conference, during the election campaign, when I was doing interviews on the television sometimes, I'd be asked, what's the point of getting a Lib Dem elected? They're not going to form any government, are they? And to that, I say this. Never take voters for granted. Never lose sight of what matters. The Conservatives, year after year, chose chaos and confrontation over listening to what matters to communities. And just look at the result. The neglect of the National Health Service. The Conservative government in Westminster utterly broke the NHS. We've seen the report just this week, and it is scathing. And I've got to say the SNP government in Edinburgh has been just as bad, despite higher per head funding. And that's why Liberal Democrats are the party of the NHS and care in every part of Britain. The out-of-touch Conservative Party, who allowed hospitals to crumble and waiting times to soar, can never be trusted with the NHS again. Nowadays, the ATM scramble to see a GP is even harder than securing an Oasis ticket. We cannot go on like this. So, Liberal Democrats in the House of Commons will stand up for health, we will stand up for our communities, and our ambitions do not end there. Because I've had the privilege over the last 5 years to deliver some real change in Parliament, but in delivering change for my constituents as well. Like, for example, helping the Scottish Deer Centre find a new owner when it was at risk of closure during COVID, or working on a cross-party basis to support the Linda Norgrove Foundation in ensuring 19 Afghan female medical students were able to come to Scotland to study. And it was my pleasure to meet them in the Scotland office in Edinburgh just a few short weeks ago. But it's also about delivering changes to the law. It was my bill, the Carers Leave Act 2023, that gave carers the right to fight and take unpaid leave. And the day that bill was brought into law was one of the proudest moments of my life because of the tangible impact that it would have to so many of my constituents and so many people across the country. Thank you. And I'm delighted to again have that opportunity after having been successful in the private members' bill ballot again last week. Call me for tips. And to be joined by 3 other Liberal Democrat MPs at the same time, Max, Danny and Ros. So watch this space for what we're going to do with that brilliant opportunity that we have. You see, if changing the law is something that I could do as one of just 15 Liberal Democrat MPs, when we were the 4th party, when we were consigned to the very backbenches of the Commons chamber and shut out by the standing orders, then just imagine, with our new 3rd party status, just how many things Liberal Democrats can and will deliver this Parliament. 72 local champions, delivering for their communities and delivering for the country. I simply cannot wait to come back to conference again and again this Parliament and hear how it is Liberal Democrats making the difference and delivering the fair deal that their communities need. Thank you.